everyone doing?
Please pass the sheet.
Good.
Yeah,
Nice to see everyone.
thank you.
Okay. We are in a time period that you may have seen if you get the email every day from Rabbi Alex. Count.
Oh, yeah, the element.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah,
Get some copies every day.
good. So what is that time period called? The Omer, Sfirata Omer, counting of the Omer. Okay. We're gonna get a little bit of background and then we're gonna talk about counting the Omer. So, number one, what is the Omer? What is it?
Waiting period accounting toward expectations of receiving God's gift to us, the Torah.
That is, that's very high. I'm gonna bring this back to the grammar, but yeah, that's very high. Elliot is saying it is counting, leading us to the Torah. So the Omer itself is bookended by two holidays. It is we'll put it on the table. The Omer is a 49-day period that is bookended by two holidays. What are the two holidays? Sa and Shavuot. Those are the two holidays. We're gonna read why in a few minutes.
You start counting after the seventh day. Rather than after the first day.
Okay, we're gonna talk about that, right? But let's just say in general, and what Elliot was saying is, we are counting leading up to Shavuot, in which we celebrate the anniversary of revelation at meeting God at Mount Sinai, receiving the 10 Commandments. Okay, but you also talked about anticipation. What was the phrase you used? Something like that. Anticipation. So is anyone here a farmer? A gardener? Right? You might know that almost every holiday on our Jewish calendar is tied to the agricultural agrarian livelihood and the agricultural cycle that our ancestors did in Israel. So we are focused on the crop and harvest cycle of Israel, even though we live in Pepper Pike or Beechwood or Shaker or Solon or Aurora or Hudson or, go down the list. I probably lost a couple here. University Heights, South Euclid, right? Go down the list.
I live in the ghetto of Cleveland Heights.
Cleveland Heights. Wherever we are, that cycle is potentially different, right? When in the spring in Israel, it's still winter here, right? Right, we pray for rain when it's not good here, but it's good for Israel, right? So all of our focus is in Israel and the calendrical cycle. The calendar is based on living in Israel and farming in Israel. So, and we go through all different holidays. Sukkot, right, is the end of the fall harvest, right? And Tu Bishvat, right, is the first beginnings of saplings in Israel, right? The almond tree I've been there, the almond tree actually blossoms on Tu Bishvat, right? So it is focused on that. So with most holidays, and so also during the Omer, there is an agricultural basis for it, oftentimes connected to the sacrifices that the Bible, that the Torah required us to bring to the temple, which doesn't exist anymore. So if I say that the word Omer means what? That Omer doesn't mean cycle, what?
Something.
Doesn't mean grain.
Sheaf.
She's a sheaf, whatever that means. So Omer is actually a volume measurement, or I don't know, volume. It is a measurement. It is an amount of something. An Omer is, let's say, it's a quantity. Yes, an Omer is an amount of something. And now we get to sheaves. It is an amount of grain that was brought to the temple daily as an offering during the 49 days, sorry, not grain, barley, I said it wrong. It is barley that was brought because I'm not a farmer or a gardener, but in Israel, barley came up first in the spring. You harvested barley and then you harvested grain. If I was gonna ask you, what's a more important harvest? What's a more important thing to live on? What's a more valuable thing to live on? What do we live on more, barley or wheat?
No,
Wheat.
not if you're not gluten free.
Right, unless you're gluten free, right? We are a wheat-based society. And we also were before, and we relied on wheat to survive. So the 49 days of the Omer actually matched the wheat growing cycle. So the anxiety, now we're getting to Elliot, the anxiety during this time period is, we're only gonna have barley and we're not gonna have wheat. We need wheat to survive. I don't know what the crop is. Are there sometimes, are you, anyone here a home gardener? Sometimes you get a million tomatoes and sometimes you get 3,
Yeah.
right? So, right, you don't know, right? We put our faith in, whether you want to say the soil or God, right? We put faith in God that our produce will come, and we do a lot of hard work around it, of course. We're not lax, right? But God provides, right? So during these 49 days, people were worried. So that's the anxiety, right? You might know part of the Omer is semi-mourning, right? Theoretically, you're not supposed to shave. That's why if you go to Cantor Shipman's class, you'll see he's growing a beard, right? There, you're not supposed to get a haircut, right? I got a haircut on Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is a happy day, but there's a couple of happy days sprinkled in there, but otherwise, you're not supposed to get a Lag BaOmer, right? We don't do weddings. Oftentimes I get a call, can you do a wedding for me the first week of May or April? I love to, but it is a sad time period and we don't do weddings, right? And they're all you're not supposed to go to concerts, right? And all these other things, right? So if Billy Joel comes in the first week of May, you might go, right? Yeah.
Why is it same time?
Because the rabbis actually give 5 reasons, then we're actually at some point gonna get to what I prepared. Yeah, the rabbis give multiple reasons. By the way, if someone gives you 4 reasons for something, it probably means they're not sure what it is. So reason number 1 is that we don't know what the harvest is gonna be. You know, like the Jewish joke, you worry, but I'm gonna do it wrong, but the telegram, right, where, worry because X is gonna happen. We worry before the thing happens. So this is pre-worrying that we're gonna have enough grain to survive the season.
So you're busy preparing for it.
Also, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're sad.
It's not
It
sad.
doesn't mean you're sad. So number 1 is we don't know what it's gonna be, so we're already worried about what's gonna happen. Like, something's wrong, you don't have the diagnosis, so you are worried, right? In fact, you're so worried that you stop doing anything joyous because you can't even bring yourself to joy.
Preventative.
Worry. So that's option 1. Option 2 is, right, there was either a plague that hit, Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students that studied with him and they had a civil war against each other. It's also connected to, if you know, the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was 100 years following the destruction of the temple, when Hadrian, the Roman emperor, really put the schmeiss on the Jews, wouldn't let us practice Judaism at all. That's those stories of the martyr rabbis that were burnt at the stake. But if you did a traditional martyrology on Yom Kippur, we would literally read about how these rabbis were flayed and burned to death, not very good things. So, right, but if you have like rabbis being massacred, would that be a reason to be sad?
Absolutely.
And so there are all these potential reasons, or, this Jewish revolt to overthrow the Romans failed, right? So there are all these potential reasons why it's sad. Okay, so having said all this, what's special about the number 49 in Judaism?
7.
It is 7 sevens. It is 7 times 7, right? Or we'll say 7 squared. What does the number 7 represent?
Creation.
So it's creation, good, right? So it's a special number, 7 days of the week. 7 equals completion or wholeness. Right? It's fulfilling. Now, this is completion times completion, perfection times perfection, wholeness times wholeness, which means this is like the ultimate. So 49 is a special number. And as Elliot had said, and we're almost getting to the end of the introduction, there's an idea that when we left Egypt, we were slaves for 400 years. Describe to me living in slavery, degradation, and oppression for 400 years. how does one feel?
Down. Angry.
Down, like, do you know how to like live a full life
No.
the minute you're released from slavery?
No.
And number one, you didn't know how it was last. You were on the run, right? If you read the stories of the Torah, they're actually saying maybe we should go back to Egypt. Right? This is, I forget the name of it, but there's a whole, there's a whole psychology of that, right? Like victims of abuse, right? Sort of wanna go, yeah, like there's something about going back to that system, even though it was obviously the worst system when.
But it was
like that.
familiar.
Right, it's familiar, it's whatever else. So the Israelite slaves that were freed from Egypt, they couldn't go to Mount Sinai the next day and get the Torah. They weren't ready. Right? They were not spiritually ready, physically ready, emotionally ready. They needed to have a time period of transformation, elevation, right? Lifting out of the bonds of slavery that still they felt shackled by. Right? And also, this is the last, I keep saying it's the last thing. If you are, think about someone that's released from prison after serving a prison sentence. Are they going to want to hear, okay, you're free, and these are the 613 laws you have to abide by?
They abided by them too many.
Right, like that's what the Torah is, right? And Mount Sinai, as amazing as it was that we saw God, also God said, you have to, in order to be my people, right? In order to, right, get my blessing for me to watch over you, that, right, you have to follow these 613 laws, right? How would you feel, right? If you were just living under Pharaoh's tyranny, think about it. All right, talk about yourself for 10 seconds. Yeah.
It's like the conclave.
Yeah.
They had to wait till he.
No, it started yesterday, and they had the black.
Oh.
That was, yeah.
It's longer.
It is, but it's the first Sunday.
Yeah. God. It's really something. Maybe anything. The old days.
But.
Yeah, because Francis, they didn't like he was too progressive. Yes, they're gonna go back.
Okay, have we talked amongst ourselves? Do we get enough? You can say, so, last thing. How does one observe the Omer? We don't have the temple anymore. We are not bringing sheaves of barley, an Omer's worth of barley to the temple as an offering, which the Torah says we should do. The Torah gives a second thing that we are supposed to do during the Omer. Yes, you're not supposed to go to weddings. You're not supposed to do this overly joyous things. What are you supposed to do?
You count.
You count the Omer.
You're
Okay,
not
so-
supposed to count it out.
Well, that's what we're gonna look at. So I will tell you, the understanding is the mitzvah to count the Omer with a blessing. So we're gonna jump into this text. Can I ask you a question? When you do a mitzvah, or I shouldn't say that, many mitzvot that we do, lighting Shabbos candles, I should get a better idea here. Bringing in Shabbat over a cup of wine.
Yeah.
Right? You don't just do it. I don't just light Shabbos candles. I don't just drink wine on Friday night at dinner. What do I do first? Yeah, it's called bracha la'asiyah. It is a blessing, as a preparation for fulfilling a mitzvah. I'm setting the tone. I'm recognizing before I do it that I am doing this for a special purpose, to follow the commandment and to honor God. Right? I'm not just doing it. Maybe I have wine on Tuesday too, right, at dinner, and maybe on Thursday, right? This is a different one. Right? This is a wine to celebrate Shabbat and to honor God and to mark the beginning of my 25 hours of rest, right? Same thing with lighting Shabbos candles. Yeah, maybe you have a candle at dinner on a Monday, on a Sunday night, right? This is a different type of thing.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if I go to visit a sick person in the hospital, do I have to say a praying?
So, yeah, that's why I clarified, not every mitzvah has a blessing. So giving tzedakah, right? You would think giving tzedakah is such an important thing. It is such an important obligation that we have. There's not a blessing. Not every mitzvah has a blessing. So same thing with visiting the sick.
Studying Torah
Yeah.
has one and we don't usually do.
Studying the Torah has one. Yeah,
And not every blessing has a mitzvah.
not every blessing. Probably, yeah, I need to think about that. Not every blessing has a mitzvah. I'll take it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, although you could argue that that is recognizing the wonder. I mean, that's about God, right? So my question for you is the first of the 10 commandments, I am the Lord your God who brought you, right? That is about belief and recognition about God in our world. So maybe you're fulfilling that commandment. I don't know. Yeah, okay. So we said that you count the Omer with a blessing every single night. That's with the email that Rabbi Alex says. So here's the question. It's 49 days. Life happens. We forget things. Even you might not see Rabbi Alex's email, right? You might forget, right? The question is, what if you missed one? What do you suppose? Well, we're gonna look at this. So this is a tshuva from the yeah, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. So this is a tshuva from Rabbi Bradley Shabbat Artson and Rabbi Alan Alexander. If you don't know them, Rabbi Artson is actually coming here to Cleveland to our synagogue June 20th for the weekend. He is the dean of the Ziegler Rabbinical School where Rabbi Josh Jacobs and Rabbi Alex went to. He's a wonderful teacher and rabbi. And Rabbi Aaron Alexander, who is currently the rabbi at Addis, Israel in Washington, DC. And writes extensively, specifically about kashrut, keeping kosher, and conservative approaches to kosher. We're going to look at it, but again, if you haven't studied with me before, the Rabbinical Assembly has a committee called the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, which votes on accepted conservative practice. What is a conservative understanding of law? To do in a specific thing. We ask this question, right? What does a person do if you forget during the 24-hour cycle of counting the Omer, right? May you continue saying the Omer, may you continue saying with the blessing? Are you allowed to count it without saying a blessing? So you don't see the answer yet, but I'll show you the vote went 11, yes, 3 no, 4 abstentions.
Wow.
Yeah, so these are all conservative rabbis, respected conservative rabbis that sit on this panel. Some are halakhic experts and some are just like me from a synagogue, because the idea is obviously I'm learned, but I'm not an expert in law to that extent. But the idea is it's important to also get the sense of what everyday rabbis do and not just academic rabbis. Okay, so just to show you quickly, this is the exact quote from the Torah about the Omer and what you're supposed to do. Can someone read this aloud from Leviticus 23? Someone want to be our reader?
From the day on which you bring the heap of congregation of the day after the Shabbat, you shall count out starting weeks. It must be complete. Do not count the day after the 7th week, 50 days. Then you shall bring an offering of thanksgiving to the Lord.
Right, this summarizes what we said. This is from Leviticus. This is the law. So number 1 is, I'll show you the Hebrew first. Usfartem lachem, you shall count. Doesn't say a blessing. It just says you shall count, right? It doesn't say how you do it, right? You bring the offering. We don't bring offerings anymore. You shall count off 7 weeks, Sheva Shabbatot, and then, right, 7 weeks. This is it right here. And then it has this interesting word, timimot, which they're translating as complete.
Right.
Right, yeah, we're translating that as complete, right? And that's it. So, right, it says, right, this is what you're supposed to do. I'm gonna sort of take us through. So the question is, what does this word timimot mean, complete? And how does that mean the counting cycle? So there are 3 approaches. Now we're gonna get to this question. If you don't say the blessing, I should have showed you, sorry, the blessing is here. I skipped that. There is a blessing. This is, I say, brakala asiyah. Before you do an action, you say a blessing. This is the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitzonu mitzvotav v'tzivanu Asher Omer. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us through the commandment to count the Omer. Then if you do it, you're supposed to literally say the number, right? Today is the blank day of the Omer. Then if you're back in 2 weeks, right? This is what, it's been the first week and it's the fourth day of the second week, basically. Right? That's how you count the Omer. And if you see Rabbi Alex's week daily email, it tells you how to do it. Okay, so the question is, if you skip a day, does that fulfill that verse from the Torah that says you count 7 weeks completely? That's gonna be our main answer here. And what are you supposed to do if you miss a day? I often, every year I miss a day. I'm like ashamed to admit it. Life happens, you forget. You know, some people have Omer counters in their homes. They have these beautiful pieces of art or something, right? To try to remind them, you know, or whatever else, or you get Rabbi Alex's email, or they have apps that can remind you every day. So let's go through. The two rabbis, Artson and Alexander, present 3 options based on Jewish history and law. Anyone have any question before we jump in?
I do.
Yeah, Kenny first and then Siona.
We used to count the Nickman Chapel.
Yes,
I think the last couple of years we haven't.
yes,
Yes.
yeah. So we're gonna talk about when you're supposed to count. Well, I guess we'll just say now. When in the day are you supposed to count?
Evening.
We're gonna actually see in this why. You're supposed to say it at night. When it gets dark. And that's actually we'll see, that's one of the understandings of the word Smimot is you fulfill a complete day in the 7-week cycle and then you count, meaning as soon as it gets dark, next night you count. So we currently do not, the answer to you is we currently do not have any services when it's dark out. That's the reason we're not saying it, right? You could, we're gonna get to this question. If I forgot at night, do I say it in the morning? That's the question. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Siona and then
Quick
Bob.
one.
Yeah.
It says a count after Shabbat. It doesn't say after Pesach. Why is that?
Yeah, the rabbis interpret that to be Pesach. I can give you a long story why, but it means, to the rabbis, it means Pesach.
Okay.
Yeah,
After dark, it's the next day.
yes, you're counting the next day, correct? Yes. Yes. Okay, so approach 1. Where'd I go? Okay, approach 1 is, if you miss an entire day, counting may continue, but without a blessing. Thus one, we count all 49 days, right? One must count all 49 days with a blessing to fulfill that word Smimot. If I skip a day, I can still count just the number, but I can't say the blessing because I've nixed my opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is all 49 days straight with a blessing. You just say, today is the blank day of the Omer, the blank day of the week, and yeah, that's what you say, yeah. Okay, so let's go through why this is the reason. Okay, and you can see this is from the 9th century Babylonian rabbi who was named Shimon Karaya, who wrote a book of law called Baal Halachot Gedolot. Okay. So, and it was accepted by Joseph Caro, who lived in Spain in the early 1500s. Anyone know what Joseph Caro is famous for? He is the author of the Shulchan Aruch. If you've heard of the Shulchan Aruch, very important. That is actually still from the 1500s, the legal code we turn back. It is the most recent legal code that we hold by. Compendium legal. We have like little legal codes about specific things, but the entire code, if I want to look at how to do something Jewish, I still go back to Rabbi Caro from the 1500s. He is, one last piece, he is Sephardic. In the Shulchan Aruch, if there is an Ashkenazic difference of opinion, then Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, known as the Ramah, who lived in Poland, will say, Sephardim follow Rabbi Karo, but Ashkenazim do differently and would say what the difference is. But if it's nothing, then Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jews agree. So this is what that rabbi, the original rabbi, this guy Kayara said. Yeah, this guy, okay. So this is what he says. Cindy, you want to read? You offered to read before.
And if one forgets an entire day or 2 days and doesn't bless, a blessing may not be recited subsequent.
Pretty clear, right? If you skip the day, what do?
Yeah.
You don't say a blessing, right? This is, these are our contemporary rabbis. This approach assumes that a complete counting entails all 49 days as an indivisible unit. An implication of this approach is that by forgetting even a single day, to mimot, that word from the verse from Leviticus about the Omer cannot be.
So.
All right, we're gonna just look at, let me just look at the Shulchan Aruch's wording and then you can tell me. All right, Cindy, you want to just read? This is that one from 600 years later that theoretically says the same thing.
If one forgets to bless an entire day, whether it is the first day or any other, he counts the rest of the days without a blessing.
Right, same thing. All right, yes, Ron.
I was gonna ask if the mitzvah is to count 49 days completely. Why do you say a bracha each day rather than just once?
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Okay. Right, the question, so what Ron is asking, and I'll say it in a little different way, is the mitzvah, is the obligation, what that verse from the Torah says, that the obligation is every day during the 49 days, I say a blessing and count the Omer, or is it just during these 49 days, I say the blessing and count once, the beginning, the end? I probably put words in your mouth, but yeah.
Where I was going was, if each one's a mitzvah, why would you count without the blessing if you did that day's mitzvah?
Mhm. Yeah.
Here I am, I'm done.
Yeah, just a note, what they write in here is a couple of sentences. Okay. Right, in their understanding, the blessing and counting are inextricably combined. The raising the question of not counting at all is neither here nor there, right? What the rabbis interpret it is you still count every single day. You still say today's the blank day of the Omer, even if you didn't say a blessing and you skipped it, you still count, right? That's position number.
We can keep track of calendars.
Yeah. What do you mean, how do you keep track? I mean.
Scratches on the bedpost.
Somehow they knew when Pesach was, right? Like, I mean, it isn't like. Somebody knew when Pesach. I mean, number one, as Kenny said, even back then they had minion services, right? So my bet is back then they did it actually at night, whereas we, go at 6 o'clock, whatever time of the year. So right now it's actually technically the afternoon. So they probably had evening services. So they probably said it at evening services. Yeah. Or if they didn't, then they went home from minion and said it. Yeah, that's my answer, right? Just again, a note that one remains obligated to count each day of the Omer. Many Jews today incorrectly assume if they stop reciting the blessing, they skip a day, that you don't actually need to count the days. You should still count the days. Okay. All right. Last thing, right? According to Rabbi Karo, that we should avoid this concept called bracha levatala, saying a blessing in vain. And the rabbis are very concerned about taking God's name in vain, saying a blessing that didn't need to be said. I'm actually sinning, right? So this is saying I don't say a blessing after I skip a day because I might not. I shouldn't say it, and therefore I'm taking God's name in vain. It's not like I have an opportunity to say a blessing. I got to be careful not to say a blessing. Okay. Argument against approach number one, right? So it's about, what does this word tamimot mean? Okay, now we're gonna go to Italy, if that's okay. 1200s Italy. Cindy, you wanna read? The word tamimot.
Word Timimo teaches that the obligation to count begins at night.
Yeah, e.g.,
That
for
each-
example.
That each day itself must be complete, implying that each day constitutes a mitzvah in and of itself. Rabbi Isaiah ben Mali Detrane
From Italy.
presents both arguments in his Sefer HaMakriya.
Yeah, okay, right, so that's sort of the idea, and then this is actually it, right? If one forgets and doesn't count an entire day, subsequently, one may not count, for there would not be tamimot. Tamimot means I wait an entire day, I said the blessing entire, if you didn't say a blessing for that entire day, you don't fulfill it, right? But then he gives the other opinion. The Torah only said tamimot to teach that the counting begins at night. That, like, the only reason that that word tamimot is in that opening verse in the Torah about it isn't to say you have to count all 49 days completely. Reading number 2 is, right? I say I count 7 weeks of 7 days, tamimot at night. Do you understand? There's a very different understanding and translation. Yeah, Judy.
I remember many, many years ago learning that on second night of Pesach, not even to say it if you don't think you can do it every night.
If you can't do it, don't start.
Don't even start.
Because then it would be a bracha levatala. It would be a blessing in taking a blessing using God's name in vain.
But that would be only,
Whether it was the second day and some people, or is it just the question of when you start? Some of the prohibitions.
Yeah, the prohibition, yeah, everybody has a different idea when you start and stop the prohibitions, yeah. Okay, do you understand the nuance that they're trying to show here?
if you counted 49 days complete, wouldn't
Yeah.
you count the day at the end of the day to make sure that you completed the day?
There is a principle in Judaism,
I know. you
the
have to
early
do
bird
the-
gets
yeah.
the worm.
But
No, actually it
But
is.
if it has to be complete, you have to wait till it's complete.
Yeah, well, I'm just telling you, this rabbi understands it the opposite way. The early bird gets the worm, right? It's called, it actually is something in Hebrew, zerizim mitzvah. You should always run to do a mitzvah. The first opportunity you get to do a mitzvah, you should do it. Makes sense, right? That we should be zealous that way. There's a very important phrase here that he also says, this phrase, every day of the Omer is a mitzvah in and of itself. But the Hebrew is bifnei atzmo. Here he is saying every single day of the 49 days of the Omer is a different mitzvah. You have 49 opportunities during the Omer to fulfill a mitzvah. That's very different than saying it is one complete unit that takes 49 days to finish. Right? That's very different. Okay, yes.
What is the interpretation of the word mitzvah?
Here it's saying obligation. Right? We have 613 obligations, requirements.
When you think about doing a mitzvah, you think about doing a good deed.
Yeah, that's not, this is the, that is the way we talk about it, like in common talking. For the rabbis, the word, that would be ma'asim tovim, good deeds, deeds of kindness.
Well, isn't that,
That's,
so
so,
that what we're teaching?
yes, but I'm saying in this particular conversation and study, the word mitzvah has 2 definitions. Definition 1 is the one that you said, good deed. Definition 2 is Torah level obligation, or rabbi level, the rabbis require us to do this. Okay? Option 2. Someone want to read the bold? This is idea number 2. Yep. Michelle?
Since each day is a mitzvah in and of itself, if one misses an entire 24-hour day of counting with a blessing, one may and should still continue to count with a blessing the next day.
Okay, right? Option two is if based on that last phrase, right? It is a mitzvah each and every day, its own mitzvah, right? The 33rd day of the Omer, you have a mitzvah to count the Omer. The 34th day, you have a mitzvah to count the Omer. Each day it's its own mitzvah. It starts from scratch. Then therefore, shouldn't you be able to say the blessing each day, even if you miss a day? Right? This is that same Italian rabbi. From the fact that we make a separate blessing every night, learn from this that each and every day is a mitzvah in and of itself. It doesn't prevent another.
You don't have to start over with a count.
Well, number one, you wouldn't start over because the Omer is a set calendar thing, right? But if I didn't do it until the 15th day, I learned about it, I thought about it, I forgot, I was famished, I was in the hospital, I was in a coma, right? Go down the list,
You
right?
were 13 yet.
I was traveling, I wasn't 13, I didn't have a bar mitzvah until then, right? Whatever reason, I couldn't say it. I couldn't say it. I had laryngitis, like whatever. My mouth was wired shut, right? Whatever. I couldn't say it until that day, right? According to this, start saying it when you can say it, right? In light of this explanation, we can posit that one who misses a day of counting the Omer may subsequently pick up and continue counting with a blessing. And you may not have heard of Rabbi Detrani. You probably didn't hear about this guy Meiri either, but he's much more famous. He lived in France in the 1300s in Provence, and also the Ritva, right? These are pretty more famous rabbis, right? And interestingly, the Meiri, who's really a guy we follow a lot, he goes as far to say that even if you forget the first 48 days and it's day 49, you can say a blessing and count the 49th day of the Omer, even if you missed the first 40. You can do it the last day.
Those were the rabbis who are not from Eastern Europe.
Probably, yes. These were rabbis from Italy and France, right? So perhaps it is just a more leniency, right? By the way, right, they're arguing here, right? If you don't say all 49, right, is it complete or is it not, right? That's that same word to me both, and that's sort of the question. Okay? We're gonna sort of skip around a little bit.
I just didn't count it on time.
Okay. We do any of this? We'll see. All right, so there's like another question here, which is, yeah, we're on page 7 if you got the handout. This is from a rabbi called the Ron, or the Ron. By the way, the names of these rabbis are often, right? R is it means rabbi, and N is the first of his name, right? You see his name is Rabbi Nissen, so his abbreviation is the Ron. Makes sense, right? Until you got 7 rabbis who have names that begin with an N, and then it gets confusing.
Or they call him the Corona rabbi.
Yeah, or your name or your location. Okay, so this rabbi, the Ron, who's very famous, he has the biggest commentary in the back of the Talmud, either him or the Rosh. Yeah, so one of those two, the Ron or the Rosh. Okay, he writes, one who doesn't count the Omer on the first night, can you count subsequently, right? I did not say it on the first night. Right, this is another question, right? Like, are there specific nights you are required to say it, that then can activate me saying it any night, even if I skip a night? Does that make sense? Right, the first opportunity to say it, the beginning of the actual mitzvah, day 1, can you say it? The Ron actually says no, right? If one doesn't count that night, right? Well, he's actually asking a question. If Timimot is required, right? But the rest of the nights, if one doesn't count, a night counting may be done, right? So he actually says you have to count the first night in order to give you the option to say any other night, even if you don't say it all the other nights and you sort of skip around. There is something inherently important about starting off a mitzvah on the right foot.
Isn't it in the Haggadah?
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, if you do a second Seder, by the way, in Israel, you don't do a second Seder,
you do.
number 1,
It's not in the Haggadah.
right? It is in the Haggadah, but you have to actually do the second half not everybody does the second half of the Haggadah. Some people stop at the meal.
Yeah.
Right? And I say, not everyone has a second Seder.
Yeah.
Yes, if you do a second Seder and you do the whole thing, it is in there and you do it.
Yeah.
But that's a segment of the population.
No,
Right.
it moves around there. Sometimes they have it at the very end.
Yeah, so here's the question, but even in here, they have the alternative, which is each and every night is a mitzvah in and of itself, so surely if you don't remember the next day you can make a blessing with nights to come. So this is like an alternative, which is you can, if you miss a day, it's fine, you can say the blessing, except if you miss the first day. There's something inherently holy and important saying it the first time. Right, that you activate this blessing for the rest of the 48 days afterwards. Okay, by the way, right, we didn't say this, but what if you forget to say it at night? But as we know, a Jewish day goes until sundown the next day. So if I didn't say the blessing at night, can I say the blessing in the morning? And maybe, Kenny, maybe, I don't know, did we say it in the morning some years? Is that probably where we did it? Yeah, Zahava likes to do that, so it might have been a Zahava custom. If you know Zahava Gala, yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you go to day schools don't assume that you're gonna say it every night, and it is an educational learning opportunity. So at Schechter and at Mandel, they count the Omer in the morning at school. So maybe
With
that's the
without
reason why.
blessing.
They say it with the blessing, right? So so there's also an argument, if you don't say it at night, can you say the blessing in the morning? But you know, we can get pretty quick.
So
Crazy.
I know I'm getting way off. Can you-
Right, that's what this is actually, sorry, right? May one count during the day if you miss a night? The answer is yes. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Since the day doesn't end until there's 3 stars the next night,
Mhm.
it's really already night. Can you say it's night, so you can say it for the day before,
Well,
up until the 3rd star?
yes, up until
appears?
the 3rd star, probably.
But it would be at
Yeah.
night, so it would be okay to. do
That's
it.
actually, it's not dark yet. Not dark yet. All right, so
Not dark
basically,
enough.
there's 2 ideas, right? One may not count the Omer with a blessing if a day is missed. One may count with a blessing if a day is missed, right? So that's sort of 1 or 2, right? And then there's this whole thing, what if you miss the first day? Right, so there's a very famous rabbi from 900s named Sadia Gaon. Someone want to read this one? We're on page 9. We're making our way through this. All right, thank you.
It's
Rav
one-
Sadia.
oh,
Rav Sadia.
Rav Sadia Gaon. Reasons that the
Yeah, the
entire,
one above.
wrote that if one forgets an entire day, a blessing may be recited subsequently, with the exception of the first night. If one forgets first night and doesn't say a blessing may not be said any longer.
And then keep going. Yeah,
Rav Sadia Gaon reasons that the entire Kriyat HaOmer is one mitzvah.
it's 1 minute, 49-day-long mitzvah. Keep going. Yeah,
It begins on the 16th of Nisan and concludes on the 5th. Therefore, when one begins to count on the first night, the mitzvah has begun. And even though the subsequent night is forgotten, there's nothing to that. That is, it's no halakhic significance. And one continues to make blessing on subsequent night. But one is only continuing the mitzvah that has already been started. However, if one forgets the first night, one may not begin to count anymore for the mitzvah of counting and not begin on the 17th of Nisan, any other day. Because the time to begin, the mitzvah has passed, it is nullified completely.
so again, right, this is restating what we said before. Is it required to say the first night? That's the activating night. Because it's really one mitzvah long. Right? Do you think that, like, is the Omer, these 40, like, is it a mitzvah that takes 49 days? Is a 49-day long mitzvah? What do you guys think? Right, so I will, right, so we've seen three different ideas. One is, right, for the 49 days, you're supposed to say the blessing, and if you skip a day, you can't say the blessing anymore. You lost the opportunity. Option two is each day is a separate mitzvah, and if you miss a day, that's fine. Option three is that's good, except the first day, because that sort of turns it on and it's one long thing. Whether you say the blessing or not, you have to start off on the right foot. So he gives a very long answer. I want to go through it. It actually talks about what it means to be a conservative Jew and follow Jewish law. So if you'll let me, I'm gonna take you quickly through this. You can either read it on the screen. I'm gonna like do the important things. It's all probably. But I'm gonna sort of read through, and it starts on 10. So he calls this the old new approach. Ready? Why consider offering an alternative to the prevalent tradition of discontinuing the recital of a blessing while the counting of the Omer after a day has been missed? After all, the practice observed this way throughout most of the observant world, right? If you ask any Orthodox Jew, they would say, if you missed a day, you stop. After all, right. Can we really allow people to count the Omer with the blessing even if a previous day was missed? Why is it worthwhile to offer an alternative to this law? Since this has been adhered to since the time of the Shulchan Aruch. As I said, the last 500 years, if you want to know an answer to something, you go to this book called the Shulchan Aruch. From the perspective of positive historical Judaism, which in code word means conservative Judaism, Jewish practice is a developing organism, which moves organically rather than linearly. Jewish law rarely speaks with one voice alone, and often evinces a range of responses that reflect the life of the Jewish people in different ages and locations. A healthy respect for Jewish legal pluralism encourages reclaiming a more flexible alternative to the stringency of prohibiting recital of a blessing over a 24-hour time period and lapse. Okay, and can anyone say this in English?
We're allowed to, if we're conservative Jews.
Why?
There have been different opinions throughout the years, so why should it be any different now?
So number one, according to conservative Judaism, Jewish law is organic. It is dynamic. It changes based on situations and understandings. Number two, he has shown you that since the year 900, there's been a variety of opinions, 3 separate opinions, and each of those have tracked a series of rabbis generationally that have followed each of the 3. It's not like one rabbi 1,000 years ago gave one opinion and nobody else said anything about it, right? Each of those have sort of had a following of pretty representative rabbis. Okay. A second consideration emerges from the nature of how our people, conservative people, grow in observance of Judaism. While affirming the obligatory nature of Jewish law as a whole, Judaism has encouraged a pedagogy of gradual growth and a resistance of the kind of all or nothing mentality that would preclude most of our people from exploring the possibility of deeper engagement with Jewish law, meaning what we call the latter approach. Okay, I don't expect you to keep kosher 100% and Shabbat 100% if you haven't done it before. You're gonna take steps to do it, right? First thing, let's stop eating shellfish and non-kosher meats, right? Let's stop eating meat and milk together. I'm not gonna tell you immediately to go out and buy 2 sets of dishes and keep the most strict thing, like kosher home. Let's phase in. Right, at some point, we're gonna kosher home and have you buy multiple sets of dishes and silverware and everything, but this is probably a more healthier way of taking on that life cycle. I'd love for you to do 25 hours of Shabbat. Let's start with all day Friday night. You are home Friday night, you're not using electronics, you're not using electricity, you're having dinner with family and friends, you're not cooking up to the minute that people walk in the door if Shabbat started. Let's phase in. That's what they're saying here. Maybe that for, the all or nothing thing doesn't work for everybody. Excessive stringency may discourage growth in mitzvah observance. We must help cultivate an atmosphere of increasing observance by celebrating each positive step forward, rather than imposing a stultifying all or nothing approach to observance. To encourage our people to grow gradually in mitzvot through a host of areas is a prudent pedagogical response. Right? Not saying right or wrong, he's posing this as an alternative. Okay, accordingly, now get into the. Accordingly, we seek to reopen a pre-modern practice to counting the Omer as more in keeping with a textured approach to observance in Torah in general, while still affirming the validity of the more recent position that prohibits reciting a 24-hour omission. Amara Da'atra, a rabbi who makes a decision for a community, may certainly hold that it is unnecessary to modify the accepted law. After all, minhag avotenu biadenu, that it is acceptable, and we always try to follow the accepted practice that has been handed down to us from the previous generation. Just like you might know a couple of things. Why don't we eat kitniot on Pesach, right? Legumes and stuff, even though we know legally it is allowed, because it's been our tradition, right? Tefillin, there's one tradition you wear tefillin during the intermediate days of Pesach, Chol HaMoed, and one tradition you don't. And do you know what the answer is? You do what your father did or your mother did, right? You do what your grandfather did, minhag avotenu, whatever right? It's not legally, you can go either way. You do what they did before, right? So they're saying here, all right? It's been an accepted practice. If you miss a day, you don't say the blessing anymore. Minhag avotenu, or there's a reason to change. Right? This is a legal, legitimate halakhic position where the burden of proof is properly placed on the one who seeks to change an accepted norm. However, we believe there is a strong halakhic and social evidence to suggest that a second approach may be adhered to for the decisive rabbi of a community if he or she so chooses. Okay. I'm jumping around, sorry. Now we're on page 12. Furthermore, it is entirely possible that many individuals exist within a congregation who are meticulous about counting every single night. If this individual misses a day or two for whatever reason, it would be unfortunate to necessarily allow them from continuing with the blessing with so much legal support for allowing one to continue. The power of making a blessing is significant. In Jewish tradition, it's hard to separate an act from its accompanying blessing. Okay. We would not want to deny any of our congregation to whom we are trying to bring a love and sense of awe for God through our tradition, the ability to not experience this possibly transformative moment. Okay, we're almost done. Okay. We're on 13. Okay. Sak halacha, this is the decision that, if you remember, they voted 11 yes, 3 no, 4 abstentions. Okay. Number 1, as Rav Karo in the Shulchan Aruch, that main law code from 500 years ago, says if one misses a day of the Yomer, one should continue to count, but no blessing. And this is here the real question. If I'm leading the congregation, if I'm the cantor or the rabbi or the person davening that's leading everyone, and if we are counting the Omer and in our service, how can that person do it if they are no longer obligated to, right? Makes sense, right? That person shouldn't be leading tefillah, leading prayer that night if they can't say the blessing and we are saying it, right? So there's like a second piece to this.
What are you supposed to do if you've skipped a day, you're not gonna do the blessing, but you're in a service and somebody's gonna do
Give
the
someone
blessing?
else do it. Just for example, right, there's a fast day. Not everyone here is required to fast. Not everyone can healthily fast. Should they be leading the fast day service when we actually say special prayers about fasting? And actually only a faster is allowed to say that, right? I'll be honest, like now with my
My
heart stuff,
question was
I'm fine, but my doctor does not want me to fast anymore.
Okay.
There are days where I'm the only person qualified to lead a service in there, so I lead it, but maybe I shouldn't be. Because I am actually not fasting.
My question,
Yeah.
my question was from a
Yeah.
congregant's position. If you know that.
You say amen.
Or is
Oh.
gonna say it,
Then you say it to yourself.
do you just, you
You
count,
say it
you
to
don't-
yourself.
You don't say it at all, or?
No, you say the blessing yourself.
No. The Shliach Tzibor is going to say it.
Yeah.
I've missed a day.
Amen. You say amen.
Do you say the
Yeah,
amen?
you say amen. You say amen. You heard a blessing being said. Yeah. You're not gonna not say I'm like,
I don't know.
I am
I'm wondering if
specifically
you're
not
supposed to-
saying amen to your blessing. I am
Here's what-
not amening your,
You don't hear.
I'm not amening your blessing. I'm not seeing that as your.
Just supposed to shut house, don't.
You just say amen, amen. Okay, but option, so just to show you, right? It's interesting. He doesn't say just say a blessing or don't say a blessing. He gives you options, right? Option one is follow the traditional method. You don't say a blessing anymore. Option two is if you miss a daily Omer, whether the first or any other, say a blessing regardless of the day, right? And such a Jew can be the leader, even though traditionally it was the other way, right? Or the rabbi can say for the community, anyone can say the blessing, but the person leading, if they are exemplar, if they are our spiritual model, right? They should say it every single night of the 49 days of the Omer. It's 101. So now that I stopped, comments, thoughts, I'll say like, this is very specific, not esoteric, but like not everybody can see Omer, but I actually think it's representative of what how conservative Judaism approaches law. Yeah, Siona was.
So basically, they're leaving it up for the rabbi to decide.
Right, so, and that was that decision. So 11 of the rabbis said, yes, I approve this, and it's up to the rabbi. By the way, we do that for a lot.
Oh,
Right,
yeah,
in Judaism, or in conservative Judaism, kosher cheese or not kosher cheese are actually both considered acceptable according to the scripture. Kosher wine, not kosher wine are both considered acceptable, consider the conservative movement. Your local rabbi makes the decision for the community. Right, by the way, even homosexuality, right, like same thing, right? And we can go down the list, right? That is each community basing it upon the senior rabbi's determination of halacha, of law. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if I go back to Leviticus where it states, I have a question. It talks about the day after Shabbat. So Shabbat gets introduced. I know that's not what we do now, but we recognize Shabbat, the last day, the complete day of creation, right? It says you shall count all 7 weeks. Doesn't say 49
Yeah,
days.
we're on page 1. Yes.
I'm sorry, day 1.
No, I'm saying we're on page 1 if someone.
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah. So it says, then it says you shall count off 7 weeks.
Yeah.
It doesn't say counting days.
Yes.
It then says this must be complete. Hey, we say Shabbat Shalom, we say have a complete Shabbat all the time.
Yes.
Why isn't it ever interpreted that we are only counting 7 times, once, at the end of a week?
Yeah, a week.
Right?
Yeah.
And even then, you must count until the day after the 7th week.
Yeah.
So it's not till then that they say, oh, by the way, that's 50 days.
This is a phrase that appears other places in the Tanakh and the Torah, right? If you think about the Jubilee year, the Jubilee year is year 50. I'm pretty sure the same phrasing is there. And there it's an understanding that it's counting 49 years. And this is the 50th year. So that's my first answer. I have to double check and look, but this is a phrase where other places in the Torah it's understood to be a 49 cycle. This is day versus year. And then there's a 50th day which completes it, or 50th year that completes it. So number one is that system of it's understood and the same words are used that it means that. Number two is it's unclear, right? Basically what you're saying, it is unclear what the exact meaning is. So I didn't bring you any of the rabbinic understanding, right? There are pages and pages of the rabbis debating what that verse means. And I'm just giving you based on what the rabbi's bottom line, this is what it means. Because it is a very muddled, right? This is not clear, right? It should have said, beginning from the day after Pesach or the 16th of Nisan, they had a calendar, right? Right? It should have said from that day until Shavuot, it also doesn't say Shavuot, you count 49 days. Doesn't say it. So the number one, the rabbis interpret it that way. Number two, it is connected to another 49 count. Yeah.
Would you comment on Lag Bomer? You haven't said anything about that. Is that some sort of
That's next
cessation or relaxation of, what exactly is
We
it?
don't know, again, like, we don't know, and we'll wrap up now because I want to be mindful of time after Elia. Lag ba'omer, which means the 33rd day of the Omer, doesn't mean a log, right? Log is gematria lamed gimel, which is 30. Every Hebrew letter has a numerical equivalent, right? 30 plus 3. That's why it's the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, right? For some reason within this sad time period, Lag ba'omer is a happy day. So again, the same reason, like, we're not sure why the Omer is actually sad. We're not sure why Lag BaOmer is happy. They give you 3 reasons, at least. There's probably 7 reasons. Reason number 1 is the plague stopped. Remember, there was that plague. The civil war between Rabbi Akiva's students stopped. Number 3 is if it's connected to the Bar Kokhba revolt, something good, right? It was a good day for the rebellion. We won. Option 4 is the greatest mystical rabbi in our time, the Rashba, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is a Talmudic rabbi, who is buried on Mount Meron next to Sfat in Israel. That is his yortzites. And he was such a great rabbi that yortzites aren't always sad. Sometimes a yortzite is happy. And in fact, that is the day where if you have a child who hasn't cut their hair for 3 years, that is the day of the upshurim. That is the day where your son, right, has the community-wide haircut. You can't afford the salon, so everyone comes and takes a step. I'm being facetious. It's actually a beautiful thing because it's connected to the laws of the growing of trees in Israel and an idea that each tree grows and for certain years you're not supposed to touch it, that you're actually supposed to let it develop. And then at some point you can begin to get its fruits. So the same idea with children and recognizing the developmental qualities of children and what they're supposed to inherently be and what we're supposed to teach them. So it's a real beautiful custom. But yeah, that's a little bit of Lag BaOmer, right? And like why we do bonfires and the bow and arrow are connected to some of those reasons that I gave you. Yeah, so thank you for studying with me. Remember, next week is special, still here, but Rabbi Tamar Biala is zooming in from Israel. She is an amazing teacher. Rabbi Jacobs often brings her teaching, and specifically she's teaching about new understandings of the Torah, new commentaries of the Torah from women from Israel, based as a response to October 7th. Bye-bye, everybody.